when I think of kit lenses, I think bad build quality, poor optics that lead to soft images, and the overall sense that the manufacturer didn't put a ton of care into designing these lenses. However, just because most kit lenses are bad, that doesn't mean they all are. Lenses like the Panasonic 20-60, the Canon 24-105, the Fujifilm 18-55, those are all examples of what a good or a great kit lens can be. However, the best kit lens I've ever used is the Fujifilm 35-70 for the GFX system. Okay, so before we really get started into this video, I want to say I'm sick. I'm sure you can probably tell by the sound of my voice. I'm a bit under the weather, but I still wanted to film a video. So the first thing that I want to talk about are the pros of this lens. I have 5 things written down, and I kind of rank them in terms of what I think is the most important to the least important. The first one being optics. The lens is amazing. I have the camera right here. But the optics are absolutely amazing. So this is the GFX 50S2, so a 50 megapixel camera. However, these lenses resolve detail on their 100 megapixel sensors just fine. So that's the reason why I put optics as the best thing, in my opinion, that this lens has going for it. The image quality is absolutely outstanding. There's very little chromatic aberration. Any lens distortions that are there are very easily correctable in Lightroom with the lens correction profiles. And generally, when it comes to image quality, I have no complaints about this lens. I think it does an absolutely amazing job. It is sharp corner to corner. And most of the time that I'm shooting it, I have it stopped in at f5.6 anyways. And shooting at f5.6, the results are absolutely amazing with this lens. The second pro of the lens is that it's collapsible, which really helps the entire setup be a lot more portable. One of the lenses that I was really intrigued with at first was the 32-64, and that's until I saw a size comparison between these two lenses. You do have the advantage of having a constant f4 aperture through the entire zoom range, but this is just so much more compact. And like going back to the first thing that I mentioned, the optics are still so amazing, and it is just a lot smaller and easier to take around. So that's why number 2 is the collapsibility of this lens. The next thing I want to talk about is the actual focal range of the lens. 35-70 just feels like a great focal length in my opinion. 35 will give you the full frame equivalent field of view of a 28mm lens. But what I really like about the GF systems is the actual aspect ratio of the sensor. It's a 4:3 aspect ratio, which I think is better than a 3:2. I think sometimes with a 3:2 it feels a little bit too wide and not tall enough, and I feel like the aspect ratio of the sensor on this camera really solves that. That is number 3 for me, is the actual focal lengths available on this lens, and especially on the wider end being a 28mm field of view. The next 2 aren't as big as the first 3, but I still did want to mention them, so I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. The 4th one being the weight. It's a very lightweight lens, but it also doesn't feel like it's made cheaply. It's just light, and being a collapsible lens that doesn't weigh that much is really nice for the portability. And the next one is the weather resistance. You can actually see the weather seal inside the lens, which gives me a little bit of peace of mind if I was to be using the camera in a little bit of rain. I try to avoid getting my cameras wet, but it is just nice to to know that if it did get a little bit wet, it would be okay. So that kind of wraps it up for the pros. Now the next thing I want to talk about are the cons. I really only have one con, but I also don't really see it as that big of an issue. It's the variable aperture. The reason I think this is like a partial con, it's not really that big of a deal, because, you know, I think the trade-off of having a variable aperture but then also having this lens come in at the price point that it does and also be the size that it does is a very, very fair trade-off for having an aperture that goes from 4.5 to 5.6. I mentioned this earlier, but most of the time that I'm using this lens, I'm shooting it at 5.6 anyways, so then I can freely zoom through the entire zoom range and not have to worry about, you know, my exposure changing a bit as the aperture stops down from 4.5 all the way to 5.6. And so that's why I kind of say that it's, I guess you can say that it's a con, but I really don't see this as that big of an issue. Again, just because there have to be trade-offs in order to get a lens to be this affordable as well as to be this size. This is actually the second time I've owned this lens. I used to have an original 50S with this lens and the Mitacon 65mm f1.4. I sold that whole system and I really missed it, and like a year and a half-ish later, I picked up this setup right here. However, what I will say is whenever I bought this lens for the first time, I bought it on sale for $500. And I think for $500, it's an absolute steal. Like, I really don't think you can go wrong buying this lens for $500. However, if you do buy it at full price of $1,000, that's when I kind of don't think I would want to pay that much for it. Not to say that it's not worth it, but if you can get it at 50% off, why not get it at 50% off, you know? Buy it used from someone, or just wait till the end of the year when all these companies are having their, you know, Black Friday sales. Overall, I really can't recommend this lens enough. I'm working on potentially the beginning of a photo project at that scrapyard, and I've been using this lens to take all of those images, and I can't be happier, honestly. I think it's just an absolutely amazing lens, and paired with the GFX 50S2, I think it's such an amazing combo. And so yeah, I really can't recommend this lens enough. You know, in my opinion, like I mentioned earlier, it's the best kit lens ever made. And the price that it can be had at and the performance that this lens has, I think is completely unmatched by anything else that I've used. And so yeah, if you are someone who's interested in picking it up, I would highly suggest getting it, but just not paying $1,000 for it. If you can get it cheaper, I would recommend getting it cheaper. So I think that's where I'm going to start wrapping up the video. If you guys like the video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It really does help me out. I'll leave my Instagram and my website in the description below if you want to check out any of my own work. I'll also put my Instagram just on the screen right here. So yeah, thank you guys again for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.